Okay, so I lost about a 2 hour podcast with Sarah. Same one, same girl from podcast number 3, because I didn't test the audio before beginning it. It's always important to do a test run of the audio to make sure that all the settings are correct before you actually begin the podcast. Um, Still a learning process, man. I just so many things that have to be set up correctly in terms of the recording devices, disabling, enabling, setting the correct device as the default device. Using more than one headphone, you have to use virtual audio cable in order to integrate the various lines. Where is USB audio devices? I hope this is calibrated correctly and that this is not too quiet or too loud. I need to work on that, man. That's something I need to work on. Make sure that I calibrate the levels right for these headphones before I interview Dr. Loper. And anyway, yeah, I lost 2 hour podcast. Got into um, my research into education. Watched the Sir Ken Robinson video, "Do Schools Kill Creativity?" Has more than 4 million views on YouTube. One of the most, I think, the most popular TED Talk there's ever been. The guy is not only highly intelligent and saying something that's extremely important, but he's very witty and British, so that doesn't hurt at all. And we got into a debate regarding nature versus nurture. We both agreed that nature and nurture play a role and that they're intertwined and they affect one another. But we debated the extent to which each to, to the extent to which genetic predisposition can inhibit one from pursuing, becoming an independent thinker, developing a certain interest, becoming, well read, becoming, an educated person. Argued that there's an overemphasis on genetic predisposition, and that human beings' potential for intelligence is largely underestimated, um, and that regardless of genetic predisposition, every human being is born with immense capabilities. Um, all, as Sir Ken Robinson said, we're all born geniuses. We're not born geniuses. He said we're all born artists, but that schools drive the artists out of us. I'm paraphrasing, but there's also another quote that all children are born geniuses, but they have that genius solely driven out of them. Almost all children, overwhelming majority, have the capacity for great intelligence, far greater than I. I mean, I didn't have the best education um, in the world. I had a very above average education. Um, and there was a great deal of self education that took place, um, only thanks to being inspired by Mrs. Grassi in 5th grade and Mr. Beck in 6th grade. If it wasn't for them, I would be a completely different person today and would have no interest in reading books. I would probably be more interested in playing sports or, um, I don't know, some nonsense. Um, Not nonsense, I just wouldn't have the same intellectual interests if it were not for the influences of Mrs. Grassi and Mr. Beck, respectively. They completely changed the course of my life. I was not born a reader. I was not born with the capacity to, with for higher order thinking. I developed it because of intense amount of self education that took place, and um, also because I was a social outcast. And as a result, I read many books that raised my mostly fictional fantasy throughout fifth and sixth grade. Well over 100 books. May have been 200 books. I read every day. I would go home and just read. I would read during school. I would just rush through all my schoolwork and just just read. I just had books stacked up. I go to the library all the time. So by the time I was in seventh grade, I was at a 13th grade reading level and 12th grade writing level. And in high school, I started reading books like The Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil, Signs of Good and Evil by Michael Shermer, Conciliance, the Unity of Knowledge, books about Socrates and Aristotle and Plato. They interest me. Philosophy interested me a great deal. I read a book on every single subject. Any book that I picked up and looked highly fascinating. Any nonfiction book that seemed like it was breaking the mold, that was revolutionary in its ideas. I would pick it up and read it. And I learned critical thinking skills by reading the works of Aristotle. And I forget what I read. Logic. Um, anyway, I got a good. I read books. I read Greek philosophers writing some logic. I also read a book about logic, critical thinking. Um, and critical thinking is not taught as a course in most. It's not simply not taught in most elementary schools, secondary schools, or even universities. But there are textbooks available on critical thinking, like the one from McGraw-Hill. Let's see, where is it? Where is it? Critical Thinking by Brooke Noel Moore and Richard Parker, and it goes through such things as critical thinking basics, the two kinds of reasoning, credibility, persuasion through rhetoric, common devices and techniques, more rhetorical devices, psychological and related fallacies, more fallacies, clear thinking, critical thinking, and clear writing, deductive arguments, the three kinds of inductive logic, causal explanation, and moral, legal, and aesthetic reasoning. Now, this is a textbook that should be required reading of every first year university student, but that's simply not the case. That's something I would have to be taught mostly in a didactic model. You There's other ways that it could be done. I'd have to think more about that and do more research into it. But you would take that course, and then you could take a student researcher model course, because you have that critical thinking skill set, which you can then apply to evaluating diverse viewpoints on an issue. And critical thinking can be taught even to elementary school children. There's books for high school children. You can teach it to kindergartners through such books as Lollipop Logic. And let's see, what else is there? Lollipop Logic is a book written by Bonnie Risby and Robert Brisby. And there's also there's Lollipop Logic and Logic Liftoff, which is for grades 4 through 6. They have books for every grade level in elementary school. And then there are books for that teach critical thinking and logic in high school. So, these things can be taught but they're not being taught. I never took a course on critical thinking. I never took a course on logic. I was self-taught and self-educated in logic. Well, you could say I was self-educated. I read books about logic in the library. I didn't teach it to myself. It's not as if it just emerged from my own mind. I chose to read books on my own volition about the subject. And it appalls me that most students are not aware of the basic tenets of logic, nor do they care to refer to them when forming arguments or defending their arguments or critiquing other arguments. They don't know, they don't know how to fact check things, or they don't know how to conduct research. And this has been a criticism of higher education, in every level of education for quite a while. In the middle of reading, let's see, the name of the journal article is "How Do First Year University Students Experience Inquiry and Research, and What Are the Implications for the Practice of Inquiry-Based Learning?" It was published in the Studies in Higher Education journal, peer-reviewed journal, volume 37, number 1, February 2012, pages 85 to 101. The study was carried out in the context of considerable international interest in strengthening the role of inquiry and research in the undergraduate experience, both through provision of extracurricular student research bursary schemes of various kinds, and through the development of inquiry-based learning pedagogies as methods of teaching within the curriculum. In large part, the stimulus for this trend can be traced back to the Boyer Commission's critique of teaching in American research universities more than 10 years ago. I need to read that critique. It's Boyer Commission on Educating Undergraduates in the Research University, 1998. That's something I need to read. I'm reading a lot of up-to-date articles on the subject because I want to make sure that I can't be criticized for referring to things that were published over 10 years ago. God forbid. I will integrate many of them because there's many good writings that were published on the subject, and I want to show that it's a historical trend, a continuing trend. That we're not using inquiry-based learning, we're using the download-upload model. Students, yes, and the Boyer model criticized the didactic style of teaching. And it was failing students in terms of adequate preparation for the challenges of professional life or graduate study. The Commission proposed a far-reaching blueprint for change to be based on making opportunities for student learning through inquiry central to undergraduate education from the first year. So yes, I'm not the only. This is parallel thinking. I came to all these conclusions by myself, simply through reading the works of John Stuart Mills and reading quotes by the former president of Yale, who brought up this problem, and through my own experiences and reading quotations on education primarily. I read aphorisms on education. These critiques have not gone unnoticed. These critiques have existed for well over 100 years of education, and I merely drew on those aphorisms and those little pieces of wisdom, and together formed a hypothesis, and from my own understanding of society, that professors were merely indoctrinating their students through a didactic model of teaching, and that it was simply a download-upload model that students were merely learning how to regurgitate information from a single source, and they were not learning how to look at various points of view and to use critical thinking. They weren't learning how to synthesize. They weren't learning how to analyze, synthesize, and evaluate information. They were learning how to comprehend knowledge and then recite it back. That was it. That was the end of the story. That is the didactic model of teaching, which has its place. But if you want students to achieve those higher order level thinking skills, you need to go beyond that, and it should be incorporated beginning even in elementary school to a large degree. This is the National Research Council. This is the National Academy of Sciences. This is every respected scholar, every advisory body. This is the Interstate New Teachers Assessment and Support Consortium, the National Council for the Social Studies. Various state agencies, including the Indiana Professional Standards Board. We can't go through all the different state boards that are supporting multiple students looking at multiple perspectives on an issue and being allowed to come up to their own decision, uh, their own judgment regarding an important issue. This is not something that I myself came up with. This is something. I mean, I came. It was parallel thinking. I didn't know whether it was a concern of many researchers, but obviously it's a concern of most researchers into higher education, into all forms of education, every major research body, every major think tank, every major scholar saying the same thing I'm saying. I formed a hypothesis. I sought to falsify it through my interviews with a PhD in education, through a PhD in biochemistry. I wanted to get natural scientists' take, which turned into a debate on epistemology, whether the social sciences could even come to rational conclusions, and he argued that in social sciences there's values involved. There's no way you could ever come to a firm conclusion regarding anything. And I said, well, within economics, a social science, you have supply and demand, and it is just as unbreakable a law as any law in physics. If there is no demand for cell phones, there will be no supply for cell phones. Simple logic. And if Socrates is a man and all men are mortal, then Socrates is immortal. So logical principles still apply, and we can apply logical principles to social things, to the social, to understanding the social animal, and we can apply it in psychology. We can apply it in economics. We can apply it into international relations. This scientific method of thinking, we can apply research and logical principles and the study of diverse viewpoints, and we can apply it and come to better informed, nuanced conclusions. And he said, "Well, there's way too much uncertainty." And of course, you have to watch the video yourself. The only thing is the audio quality was terrible. I'll try to get him on the podcast again. But my point was, well, you can't tell me exactly where an electron is going around an atom. You can't tell me the exact speed or the location around the atom. You can only give me a range of probability. So there is uncertainty within physics as well, is there not? So, anyway. But, of course, he got me thinking about these things, and they've influenced my understanding of the social sciences. And I had not thought about these critiques before. I could quote him in my journal article saying that within the social sciences, it's all values anyway, blah, 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 blah. And then I can respond in part to him, and then I can quote Dr. Anderson, and respond to her objections with the conclusions of the National Research Council, the Interstate Teachers, the Interstate New Teachers Assessment and Support Consortium, the National Council for the Social Studies, and various other boards, the NCSS History Disciplinary Standard. What's the NCSS? So that's the National Council for the Social Studies. There's a few dozens of other bodies which also agree with my assessment. Larry Cuban's research about well-respected researcher in education. Let's see, who else? National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. Focused. That's not relevant to what I'm doing. National Academy of Sciences. Already mentioned them. Who else did I need to mention? The Boyer Commission Educating Undergraduates in the Research University. There's dozens and dozens and dozens. The former president of Yale, Benno Schmidt, agreed with my position, what I am proposing, my critiques of education. So I'm not arguing anything new. What I want to do is bring it into the mainstream. I want to be this Sir Ken Robinson. I want to have the good rhetorical ability, be able to create a great speech, a great presentation. and to have my primary target audience as high school and high school students, college students, and their parents. I want to reach out directly to the consumers of the education, directly to the demand side, not the supply side of the equation. Seek to create a shift in demand, which the supply curve would then have to come to meet. And yes, I know it's sort of a overextension of the basic, the basic model of supply and demand. Um, but it still holds the general principles. Um, but yes, that's what I plan to do. And do a TEDx type talk, a TED talk type thing at at the university I transfer to, whether it's Widener, Temple, or St. Joseph's. Uh, Set up posters, invite several students to it, make it marketable, market it, get a list of 40, 50 students that are willing to watch the presentation, go out and get a petition or get a list of people who are interested, as many as possible, sign their names and put their email addresses down, and then go to the whatever person I had to go to and say I want to do this presentation on inquiry-based learning. My research into it. This is my research paper. I have 100 people interested in watching it. I want to do a creative, have it. I want to have it videotaped. Here's a list of professors who are also interested in seeing it. It would be posted online. I would, it would be like TED Talk if you're familiar with TED Talks. Here's www.ted.com. And I would, like to have a classroom where I could do this at that's not being used. Blah 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 blah. I go to the head of the business departments. He would probably be able to provide me with a classroom. Um, and he would have no problem with this. He would have no reason to object. He would be like, "Well, you want to do a presentation on, problem-based learning, which is big in graduate school and very interesting. And you want a greater incorporation within undergraduate studies. That's an interesting suggestion. Sure, I don't care. It's not like he's trying to protect some sort of ideology, and I'm a threat to him because because I have critiques of the didactic model. He's head of the business department. He's a businessman. He understands how innovation works, and he understands go-getters. He understands innovation. He understands people. Disruptive manner of innovation. He understands how innovation is disruptive. I don't imagine the head of the business department have a problem with me using one of his classrooms to focus primarily on the social sciences. But I'll get into business courses as well, and how we can incorporate inquiry-based learning into the business courses in order to better prepare students for the real world through inquiry-based learning curriculums, which all totally inquiry-based learning courses that are entirely inquiry-based learning with course in critical thinking and maybe basic introduction to business as a prerequisite, or psychology 101 or whatever. I'd have like psychology 102 as an inquiry-based learning methodology as described in the student researcher model. So I think it should begin in the first year, but only after the students had in their first semester studied. Every student should have a course on critical thinking, and then take their introductory courses, and then after they've taken psychology 101, they take psychology 102 whenever that takes place. They could take psychology 101 in freshman year at certain colleges, and then take psychology 102 during their freshman year their second semester, or they might, end up having to take prerequisite, taking their liberal arts courses and blah 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 blah. So they may not take until their junior or senior years, depending on the nature of their university. Different, liberal arts universities have different requirements. Some are more flexible, others are less flexible in how what students are allowed to choose. I'll make it a requirement of all first year freshman students, first semester, to take a course in critical thinking, because I think it's something every student needs. And if they're going to learn, use inquiry based learning courses, using the student researcher model for social studies or business or science or what have you, any or humanities, what have you, they're going to need that critical thinking skill set, which can be developed through a textbook, through a course in critical thinking. And I think that right now the best textbook seems to be Critical Thinking. It's currently in its ninth edition with publisher McGraw-Hill. That's the textbook I would use. So students learn how to think logically, learn how to evaluate credibility, learn how to fact check arguments, learn how to identify cognitive biases, and learn metacognition, to be aware of one's own thinking processes and avoid falling prey to the confirmation bias, avoid falling prey to the Semmelweis reflex, avoid falling prey to the status quo bias, the in-group bias, and so on and so forth. These are all very important for anyone who is going to undertake inquiry-based learning. And I know I'm talking in a very unusual way. I like to use different accents. Let's see, who am I impersonating? The person, the Psych. I was just listening to the Psych Files, and the Psych Files podcast is done by Michael Britt, so I'm talking like Michael Britt. I I enjoyed, yes, I enjoyed taking upon different speaking styles. When my dad is in the room, I will talk like my father, and when I'm around people from another country, I'll start speaking and I'll start adopting parts of their accent quite quickly, which all people do. If you move to Britain for 5 years and come back, I don't care who you are, you'll have a slight British accent at the very least. I just didn't do it very quickly, because I don't know why. I just I pick up speaking patterns very quickly, and accents very quickly, because I enjoy doing them, I suppose, and I don't know. I like to experiment with different rhetorical techniques, different ways of speaking, so I can become a better public speaker. So I'm just playing around with different modalities and different pathways. But yeah, that's pretty much a summary of what I'm doing now. That was 30 minutes. And this was the Socrates podcast number 4. And next one should be with Dr. Loper on Monday the 25th. Talking like Michael Brett from the Psych Files podcast, which I highly recommend. That's the Psych File podcast. It's on iTunes. There's also, you just look up the Psych Files podcast and it should come right up. Just look up the Psych Files and it'll come right up. It's a podcast on the latest developments in psychology and just interesting subjects that he would like to talk about. And he goes, let's go to iTunes. What has he been talking about lately? Anybody would enjoy listening to this podcast. I learned about how the little Albert study has been misrepresented in textbooks for decades. If you actually, researchers actually went back and read the actual primary source documents, God forbid, and found out what actually did occur during the little Albert study, and then compared it to what he was taught and what is being taught to most psychology students. and it's just a complete. It's gone from it became a myth. The little Albert study. It's a complete misrepresentation of the findings of the study and what went on during the study. Let's see. I'm gonna open this up and just go through a few things. What was B.F. Skinner really like? Why do you get so absorbed in that book or movie? I'd like to have an argument, please. Critical thinking, part 3. The shootings at Newton, could we have prevented it? I believe that. How many psychiatric drugs was that guy on? When you come off your meds, people, when they come off their meds, they tend to be worse than they were when they were without meds. Because not only are they crazy, not crazy, not only are they mentally ill, they are going through withdrawal from some heavy psychiatric medications. So you combine those two factors together, and you get some pretty, horrific behavior. That's my take on it anyway. Why you hate psychology, media bias and misunderstandings. Why you hate psychology, self-esteem movement, and positive, positive thinking. Let's see. Is the web making you narrow-minded? The fat trap. How not to get discouraged about the difficulty of losing weight. Psychological research under fire. How to spend your money and truly make yourself happy. Let's see. Body language. What are your thumbs revealing about you? Body language in general is very interesting. I need to get I need to get an iPod again because whenever I'm commuting or cooking dinner or what have you, I could be listening to podcasts or listening to an audiobook and using my time productively. But I have not been able to do that because I lost my iPod and now cannot keep up with my education as with my self-education as well as I had in the past. I can't keep up with the news as well because I had news podcasts I would listen to, just give me the daily breakdown of the most important news, and I can't listen to Joe Rogan podcast except via my laptop, and it's kind of hard. Like if I have if I'm going to work, I can bring my laptop, turn it on, put it in the passenger seat, and listen to it on the way there. On the way there, which is half an hour to work, and on the way back, which is half an hour, and that's an hour of my time I'm using productively. I'm listening to something that's fascinating to me. I'm learning new things. It's stimulating cognitively and intellectually, and it's great. But I need to buy an iPod, and I can for $50 buy a really great iPod used off of eBay. It's just a matter of I'm just very frugal, and I want to wait until I at least have a couple, at least $1,000 in the bank before I buy something like an iPod. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see. Savings first. Savings first. Because I need the peace of mind that comes from having a considerable savings account, something that can serve as an insurance plan against any possible breakdown of my car or any sort of nonsense that might occur. Where I will need a great deal of money in case I need. I do have two small cavities and no dental insurance. I have to finish paying off my last payment, then I can go around to different dentists and letters. I can first, of course, my dentist for a while, Dr. A. I'll send him a letter. Can I please? I'm a struggling college student. I don't have a great deal of money. I'm without dental insurance. I work part time at the hospital. I'm about to transfer to Widener University. Is there any way you could give me a discount? And I promise you that once I am, in good financial standing and graduate with my degree in business administration, that I can will be a very, I'll be able to pay you, very well, blah blah blah, something like that. I don't know. Whatever is, I'd have to think about it and have my mom read the letter and ask her if this is okay letter to write. She has better social skills than I do. I'm sometimes I overreach, or I'm too wordy, or I am just brutally honest about things and don't have tact. Social tact, it's very important. Something I don't have completely down. But I'm learning social tact as time goes on. I get along with everybody, but still, in the professional world, I know how to have social tact with my peers and with professors. But in other situations, I'm not quite sure what is appropriate. So I have to ask my mother, who is a highly intelligent woman and does understand what is socially acceptable in different business situations and different social situations with which I'm unfamiliar and unversed. And so I always look to her to proofread things I write, emails, letters, and so on and so forth, and to see whether they are acceptable. Anyway, that is the end of this podcast. And yes, I know this is a silly hat. It is my sister's hat. I really don't care because my head is cold, so I put on the hat. And I don't care. I want a blue version of this hat. I don't want a red slash pink version of this hat. But, that is a luxury I'm not willing to spend money on at the moment. So I simply will not buy this hat until I can find it for a male version of this hat. I really like this hat. It's very warm. It's very comfortable. It's the most comfortable hat I've ever worn versus a simple wool cat, which is just like wool hat, not a cat. Sounding like Dr. Seuss. That just sort of hugs your head and is it's like a vice on your head. This is very comfortable, and I like it. And I like the husky hat. It's a surfer, it's a snowboarder type hat. I like the look. I just don't like the color, but I'll deal with it. Oh no, it's red. God forbid. And it's a girl's hat. Oh no. I don't wear it out in public. I don't care. And I don't care what you guys think either way. This is a podcast, mostly for audio. But if you want to rag on my hat, go ahead. I really do not care. I'm gonna be wearing it when I go up to Widener on Saturday for student acceptance day. We're very busy asking many questions regarding housing and scholarships and when registration begins, and different aspects of the business department, internship availabilities, how many students have jobs. I'm asking seniors, did they adequately prepare you for the job market? Do you believe that you are ready to go out and get a career at this point? So on and so forth. Do you have jobs lined up? Did you get an adequate? Were you adequately prepared, you think, for the real world? Or do you find that you're not prepared for the job market you are about to enter? So those are questions I'll be asking on Saturday when I go up to student acceptance day, which will be an exciting day. And I still have to apply to Temple and St. Joseph's, but I have to write essays for those, and they're not due till June 1st, and I have research to do at the moment, so blah, 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 blah. I will get to them when I get to them. Now, even if Widener isn't the best college, if I go there and it's okay, but it's not as great as it could be, I can always transfer, for the next, make that transition to another college for the spring semester of 2014. So, whatever happens. I got accepted in Widener. Everything's getting lined up now. I don't know what's going to happen with Temple and St. Joseph's. I know I can get in, but if I apply too late, then scholarships won't be available, blah, 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 blah. I want to see what Widener offers me in terms of scholarships, and then I can make my decision. I want to see what Temple offers me. I want to see what St. Joseph offers me. Look at the costs. Look at the campuses. Look at the housing situation. It's very important to me, because I would prefer a studio apartment for about $400, plus any utilities or and hopefully free internet. Because if I'm living on campus, the internet should be free everywhere. I shouldn't have to pay a separate internet bill. I mean, how much money do you want out of me, you greedy bastards? I'll share internet with somebody else. We'll get a router and a modem, and we'll just go ahead, wireless router, and we'll share it between 5 different people. And we'll share the bill. We'll split the bill. And that way, you save some money. I'm not trying to spend. I'm trying not to take out even more loans I already have to. I have to apply for scholarships over the summer. A lot of essays that could be written, and my writing abilities are growing in leaps and bounds this semester as I get constructive criticism from all sorts of different people on how I can better improve it to communicate with different target audiences, whether high school level, graduate level, different professions, people within the healthcare field, within healthcare management, within the clinical aspect of medicine. How to write proper emails and what's proper protocol. When they start to make it less formal, you become less formal in turn. What is the proper, and so on and so forth. You refer to them as Doctor So and So, and they say yours Jay, and you say their first name. You say, "Oh hey Jay, how you doing?" I don't know. You still refer to him as sir, or would that seem like you're not picking up on a little hint saying you can just call me Jay? No need for formalities here. I don't know why this podcast keeps drawing on. Okay, this is the end of this podcast. Signing off, Benjamin Rosenzweig.